Good morning, everyone. We are going to begin this morning's celebration of life. Does this sound super echoey to you today?
Yes.
Do we know if the settings are appropriate for...
Maybe it's a little loud.
I feel like I'm speaking underwater or something like that. So while we're waiting for Andy to wonderfully adjust the microphone settings, please open your pink songbook to page 50. And we are going to begin our celebration of life this morning singing "Oh Freedom." Freedom being one of the most basic tenets of existentialism. Please rise in body or spirit as you are willing and able. Thank you, Andy. And join in singing "Oh Freedom."
I'll tell you what, we're going to, the first two verses, we're going to sing in a slow, spiritual kind of way, and then we're going to speed it up. So the other three verses.
And Good morning. Welcome to the First Existentialist Congregation of Atlanta. My name is Patton White, and I will be facilitating this morning's celebration of life. We are a spiritual community, philosophically based on on existentialist and feminist principles, dedicated to human liberation and the protection of the natural world. We make our spiritual home here in the Old Stone Church, which was hand-built by the members of the African American Antioch East Baptist Church. We acknowledge that racial hostility drove those African Americans from the area, and we honor them and the powerful history of this place. We also acknowledge that in the 1800s, the Muscogee Creek people were driven from this land, and we support justice for all indigenous people. Our opening words are also an opening activity today. One of our existential principles is about creating meaning and the importance of personal relations. Creating meaning, if analyzed carefully, actually means creating and discovering relations between people. So take a moment to breathe in and look around at the other people in this space. And consider for a moment the meaning that these others bring to your life. We share the same air, we share the same space. What do these people bring to your life? If anyone has a community announcement that they would like to share later on, please make sure that you write it down and bring it up to me. Edie gets her gold star for today, because not only did she write it down, but she printed it and placed it in every single bulletin.
That is Edith of the office.
Okay. If you still would like to write them down, we should have some paper and writing utensils back there on that little blue table. And we still have some time to write them down. Do we have anybody here for the first time, second time? That would like to be recognized? Yes, would you like to share?
We're here, my name is Tim. I are here for the second time. We're the last
Okay, could you remind me of your names again?
Diane Hauser and Dion Hauser.
Diane and Dion. Yes, anybody else? All right, any birthdays or anniversaries to celebrate today? All right, come on down. What birthday is this, Kristen?
What?
Actually, what date?
25th.
Okay.
59, baby.
Yes. So let's sing happy birthday to Kristen. Happy birthday to one more time. Anybody else? All right, then we will move on to singing something else besides Happy Birthday. And that will be one of C.J. Jones and the Spirit Bones' most popular tunes, Smitten and Bitten, which is in the new songbook, otherwise known as That Snake Song. At least that's what I know. And we actually saw a quilt at a performance that my mom and I went to, a quilt made by a woman named Marquetta Johnson, and it had a lovely snake sewn into the middle.
What is it called?
Smitten and Bitten. It's in the new book, and those are alphabetical. I wish I could tell you the page number, but I can't. Think about what meaning that just brought to your life. Please rise above your spirit as you're willing and able to join in singing Smitten and Bitten.
So as you go around the chorus and you go, ain't got snakes, everyone sings that together, and shake your fist in the air and you're holding the snake too, and you do it. Hopefully we're not snakes.
At this time, I'd like to welcome our fellowship minister, Reverend Marcia Mitch, come forward to share her remarks for today.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to see you here today. It's, I don't know about y'all, but good morning, everybody. I'm glad to see you here. I don't know about y'all, but boy, we had a storm last night at my house. We were coming back from Home Depot at 11 o'clock last night, and we could barely see to get home. It was raining so hard. But, you know, the good thing about that is, it means that the garden that I've been working on so hard is, I don't have to get out there and water it. So I'm grateful for the sun, I'm grateful for the rain, and I'm grateful for the environment that we have. And I hope that each one of us will do everything in our power to see that this environment can also stay as clean as possible, do whatever we can in that regard. And I hope that if you have your own little piece of earth that you enjoy working in, that you enjoy it as much as I do, because it's the place where I really feel that spirit, because I feel like I'm part of so much of the earth and everything, the worms, when I see the worms and the ants and everything, it just really makes me feel like such a part of the whole of the universe. So, and if you don't like that, then just go out and look and enjoy. Okay?
Let's start over again. Our featured speaker today is Kodac Harrison. Although Kodac grew up in Jackson, Georgia, and graduated from Georgia Tech, he's also done his fair share of wandering. He earned an MBA at Tulane University in New Orleans, served time in the Army on the West Coast, played gigs in New York, California, Georgia, the Carolinas, and places in between, as well as in Germany and other parts of Europe. He considers his heart to be a vagabond, and he follows it wherever it leads. Please join me in welcoming Kodac Harrison.
I have a loud voice and I project well. Last time I just stood out there, but I'm going to read segments from my recently finished memoir, which is unpublished. And so I feel like when I'm reading, I'll be looking down. So I'm going to move up to the microphone so that when I'm looking down, you can hear me better. Plus, it will give me a little something to rest my material on. It's great to be back here. Like you said, I grew up in Jackson, Georgia, and Butts County was located about halfway between here and Macon. I grew up in a very segregated world in the 50s and 60s. Martin Luther King was assassinated when I was a freshman at Georgia Tech, and that was the beginning of I like to think my awakening. At that time, when I look back about things that had happened to me in earlier times in my life that contributed to that expanding of my consciousness. And I want to tell you a couple of stories about two different situations that contribute to that. Starting with the story of Susie Evans, who worked with my mother for 35 years. From the beginning, from the year before I was born until I was 34 years old. And I consider her a second mother. And I'm going to read segments of my memoir that deal with that. I've grown up in a segregated world with one white mother and one black mother. Susie Evans started working for my mother a year before I was born and worked for my mother until her death 35 years later. I called her Susie because I wasn't taught, or was I expected, to show her the same form of respect that I showed white adults. I got lost in my place there. I should keep note of that. Probably one of the first words I said was Susie. I've been taught to say Miss or Mrs. in the last name of the adult white women I was talking to or referring to. I've been taught to say yes ma'am or no ma'am to adult white women. Susie was always just Susie. That's the name that everyone, adult or child, called her, at least in the white world where I grew up. She was really the only person of color I had any contact with in my childhood. There were many others who had maids, so I occasionally ran into black women in friends' houses, but mainly there was just Susie. My mother spoke at her funeral, called Susie her best friend. I was 34 when Susie died. You didn't have to be a rich to have a maid in those days. In Jackson, Georgia, where I grew up, opportunities for black women to work in the 50s and 60s were in the fields at harvest time, at certain jobs in textile mills, or as maids. The few who had gone to college were able to teach in the for blacks only school. In fact, there were few opportunities for women in general. There were, in Jackson where I grew up, there were no female doctors, no female lawyers, no female politicians, no female preachers, etc. If a woman was educated, she became a nurse or taught school. Equal opportunity didn't exist. And in a sense, I benefited from that. What I mean is, as a result, I was taught by some of the top women in town. And I was blessed to have Susie Evans as the second mother. Example of my white male privilege, I now realize. I want to read a poem I always called her Susie. My mother was she never saw Susie angry or mad. I certainly don't remember her being that way. She worked for my mother for 35 years. It was the best job she could find. She wasn't looking for another. She and my mother became best friends. My mother said as much at her funeral. She died when I was 34. They killed her in the hospital, according to the autopsy. Gave her too much of the wrong drug. She raised me and my sister along with her blind daughter and all her children. I have nothing but respect for Susie. She was more than human. She was truly an angel. Her skin was darker than mine, and I wasn't expected to show her the same respect I showed my mother or other white adults. That never seemed to bother Susie. But then she was part of the family. She totally spoiled me. She loved me and my sister as if we were her own, and in a way we were. My father died when I was 9, and my mother would not remarry for almost 10 years. Those were 10 hard years. My mother mortgaged the house to pay for my father's medical bills. Susie helped hold our family together while she also held her own together. I am the man I am today because I had not one mother but 2 mothers, one white and one black. To me, she had nothing but good things to say. She always complimented me, no matter how bad I looked, and at times I looked bad. She was the most positive person I've ever met. Now, I love my mother, but I hope Susie knew that I loved her too. I went to see her in the hospital. She took me in like family. She greeted me with that smile I'll always remember. I regret that I didn't show her the respect she deserved, that I didn't tell her I loved her. But who am I kidding? I didn't tell my own mother. I always called her Susie. Always called her Susie. My family was a very strict religious Southern Baptist family. We didn't show emotion, we didn't hug, we didn't kiss, we didn't tell people how we felt about them until after Susie died. And by that time I had lived here in Atlanta, in New Orleans, in California, and been up to a communal farm in West Virginia. And so I brought hugs and kisses to our family. I always gave my mother a hug on the cheek and told her I loved her. And towards the end of her life, she said, I got to get my hugs. And I'm not sure when that started, because your sister was not like that. And I was thinking, I brought that to the family. I'm proud of that. But it took Susie's death for me to start thinking about those kind of things. I want to tell of another situation that contributed to my awakening of my awareness. I'm going to swallow water here. This was a certain football game. I played high school football for 4 years down in Jackson. We had 3 head coaches in 4 years. Recently, I read an article in the AJC about a coach down in Forsyth in Monroe County, which is adjacent county, and they were praising that coach for being there for 39 years or something, I can't imagine. And he should have been praised, but they also said he was instrumental in integrating the Middle Georgia high schools in the early 70s. We integrated in 66. I know this guy. He held out as long as he could. I think he deserves to be praised for his longevity, but not for bringing any kind of integration to high school football teams. We did that in 66. And in fact, this is the story I want to tell about a football game we had with Monticello. And this really was something that really, over the years, the more I've thought about it, the more it has contributed to my understanding and my awakening. As I mentioned, during the last 2 years of high school, we had what was called freedom of choice. This happened a couple of years before full integration of the public schools. Some of the brightest and best came over from Henderson High School, the black high school, to Jackson High School. Several of the black athletes came over, including one of their best running backs and one of their quarterbacks. The quarterback was a very good athlete, but there was no way our coaches were going to anoint him as the starting quarterback. In fact, he didn't play much at all. Both high schools in Jackson were relatively small. I had 82 in my senior class. In the 4 years I played high school football, we had 3 different head coaches. If a coach was good, he got hired to a bigger school. If he was not so good, he was fired. The coaches weren't adequate at selecting the right personnel for the right positions. For instance, the black quarterback, whose name was Prentice Henderson, was placed at defensive tackle for practice drills. When the young man simply skirted around our big slow lineman and tackled our quarterback, the coaches accused him of being chicken. But not because he ran around the lineman. After that, they made him try to run through the lineman. They couldn't see past their own prejudice. They were unable to see that if he could do that to our lineman, there was a good chance he could do that to opposing linemen also. Disrupting the opposing backfield would have been especially valuable on passing down. The coaches were somewhat of their times. They all wanted to be Bear Bryant or something like him. During 2-a-day summer practice in the hot dog days of August, they wouldn't let us have water because they wanted to make us tough. If the coaches did let us have water, they put a rag in a bucket of water from which we were supposed to squeeze out a little. Not only was this not very sanitary, but often the kids threw it on the ground, and if you were unfortunate to be towards the end line, all you got was a dirty, muddy rag. Kids passed out due to dehydration. Our coaches were downright sadistic at times. I remember once on a Monday practice after we had had a bad game, that they made us participate in a 50-yard head-on-head tackling drill. We lined up 50 yards apart and ran at each other, colliding head-to-head, helmet to helmet. And if we slacked off, they made us do it again. The black running back was Lee Frambo. I guess the coaches in 1966 thought it was okay to have a black running back, so Lee was named starting tailback. He was strong and fast with enormous muscular thighs. I was excited to have him on the team. I could just imagine him running over the opposing defenders as he sped his way towards the end zone. Then came the game with Monticello. Monticello was located in Jasper County, was a little more rural, a little more isolated than Jackson, which was in Butts County. Years later, I would attend an exhibition at the King Center in Atlanta, which told the story of lynchings across the United States, but mainly in the South. There was a map of Georgia with the number of lynchings that took place in each county. Even one lynching is nothing to be proud of. But there was only one listed for Butts. 9 were listed for Jasper. In 1966, I knew little about the history of racism, and it wasn't talked about in school. It wasn't taught in school. I wasn't aware. Now, I'm not proud that I wasn't marching in the front lines of the civil rights movement, that I wasn't courageous or that exceptional. I had to evolve. I grew up slowly in Jackson, Georgia. We like to think Monticello was a little more backwards than Jackson, even though Jackson was no example of great progress. There were fewer people living in Jasper County, and as a result, they were in a classification below us. But Monticello always had a good football team. We were feeling pretty good as we traveled to play them that year. We had a new coach, and we were feeling positive. Even though because of a squabble between our former coach and the principal, we had no spring practice. This was our second game of the season. If I remember correctly, we came close to winning that first game, and Lee had played well. We didn't realize what we were getting into when we traveled to Monticello that year. We pulled into the field house, the gym. There were people waiting for us. Usually no one was waiting for the opposing team, except maybe someone to show us where to go. There was a small crowd, and they didn't look friendly. Our team chaplain was a young Baptist preacher from a small church in the county. Preacher Don Hart was amazing, and we all thought the world of him. He eventually became the pastor of a large church in North Atlanta, that big Baptist church right there at Peachtree, right before you get to Buckhead. He did a great job in his life. On this night, as we stepped off the bus, he was heckled because of black players on our team. We were shocked. We never heard anybody talk to a preacher like that. It was a sign of things to come. Years later, I discussed the game with him, and he verified what I remembered of that night. As an away team, we were never cheered when we arrived on the opposing field, but the atmosphere that night was downright hostile. We didn't realize we stepped into a race war, and the whole town was in on it. This was my senior year. I was a 3-year starter and had been named captain of the team. As a result, I was aware of things concerning the team. One thing that was unprecedented was that we weren't allowed to film that game. That never happened before, never happened again. We should have known something right there, but I was pretty naive back then. In retrospect, it seems that if they didn't want any evidence of what transpired. Another thing that didn't happen, I should say didn't happen that night, is we weren't brought individual Cokes or ice water in trays during the halftime. This always happened at every game we went to, but not this night. This was long before Gatorade or anything like that. At halftime, we had to drink from a rubber hose outside the locker room one at a time. I wish I could say we played a great game and taught those racists a lesson, but I can't. They killed us, 47-0. I've never seen a team so fired up, so praised. The refs were in it also. There were numerous personal fouls that should have been called but weren't. I played linebacker on defense, and the big tackle who lined up in front of me was slugged so many times he started crying. He complained to the referees and they laughed at him. It was brutal. I can't imagine what happened to Lee when he was tackled. Most of the time I was blocking on offense, so I didn't see much, but once I saw him get punched, and what they said to him was inhumane. Lee was never the same after that game. He didn't quit, but his enthusiasm was not the same. He played the rest of the year, but I'm sure he realized no one was going to protect him, not his teammates, not the coaches or the referees. I believe I played well that night. I blocked my man and made some of the few tackles for a loss we had in the game. I guess it makes me feel better to think I played well, but I could never prove it because we had no film to back up anything. When I look back, we were in the middle of a race war. We had black players on our team. We were overwhelmed by the whole situation and had little idea what was happening. I wish I could say our team, our coaches, and all of us rallied around Lee and stood up to the injustice of that night, but I can't. Finally, our coaches took Lee out of the game for his own protection. It would take years before some of us who cared, realized what happened. I believe that game was one of the beginnings of my awakening. I've often thought of the courage it took for Lee and Prentice to leave the security of Henderson High School and come over to the White High School. In those segregated days, things were supposed to be separate but equal. In reality, things are separate but not equal. I can't say I ever went over to Henderson High School or saw the field where they played. I think it's strange that in my small hometown, I never ventured into that part of town. Since I left Jackson, the county's built a new high school with a new gym for basketball. The students use the same baseball and football fields we played on. I will venture to say the athletic facilities were superior at the White High School, but I don't know for sure. I doubt there was any personal gain for Lee and Prentice in leaving their friends behind. The gain was for the civil rights movement. The leaders of that movement could accomplish little without the courage of thousands like Lee and Prentice. When I think about they had to stand up to their own fear, that's something we all need to do. We need to get over our fear and stand up in whatever situation we're talking about. Some of you talked about different situations here. I'm reading a biography of Martin Luther King now called A Life, and it talks about, all he had to go through to stand up to fear. And Prentice and Lee certainly are heroes in that regard, because they stood up to fear and they came over and had to go through all the things they had to go through by coming to a white high school in 1966. And this coast is supposedly integrated schools in the early 70s. I don't think he gets credit for that. I want to thank you very much. Oh, I'm going to start. I'm going to read one more poem here. Now that I'm through reading from my memoir, which is not published yet. If we got any publishers in the audience, let me know. In 1988, I was honored to be asked, my band and I, to play at the King Fest down next to on Auburn Avenue, next to the reflecting pool there. We came on right after the Indigo Girls. And I was inspired, and I wrote a song, and I recorded it, sent it to the King Center, and they sent me a nice letter back thanking me and asking me to play the next year at the King Fest, which I did. And since then, I've been asked to play that song in dedication of a 126-foot mural there at the King Center, and Turner South, before they went under, made a nice little video of the spoken word version of this piece, and played it on the radio, on the TV, I should say. This is called Where Dreams Become Real. Once there was a dreamer who dreamed for all mankind, for all the forgotten people, all those left behind. He carried his dreams from the small towns and the cities to the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. He told us of the day when all mankind would be free at last. But there are those who out of ignorance and hate would destroy the dream. He was shot down in Memphis around supper time, but the dream did not die. For you can kill the dreamer, but you can't kill the dream. It lives on in that place where dreams become real. In that place, the soul is revealed and dreams become real. 20 years later, I was watching on TV when I saw the dream personified. I saw some kids interviewed down on Auburn Avenue. I knew the dream was still alive. You could see it written in their faces. You could see it shining from their eyes. You could see it in the way they held themselves, in the way they held their heads up high. The dream's alive. In that place where dreams become real. In that place, the soul is revealed and dreams become real. He said, I want to take you where dreams are real. He said, I want to take you where dreams become real. He said, I want to take you where dreams are real. Thank you.
That was from his feedback phase. Graduated from the buzz.
Thank you, Kodac. Very powerful. We have our closing congregational song, which is Instant Karma in the new book. And so you will find it alphabetically at I. Instant. Following the song, we will have our closing words, and then we will transition to our Kiddush following the celebration of life.